Welcome to MLB Live Before Lock. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. I'm joined once again by DFS legend Terry McBride. You can find him on Twitter at DigitalB21. This show is sponsored by OddsShopper, which features hundreds of bets daily to give you the edge you need betting NBA and NHL player props. And while you're coming in, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. All right, Terry, we have got a 12-game slate with no real weather concerns as far as I can tell. So I'll start with a question. Who is Packy McNaughton? Do you know anything about this guy? We just got the news that Packy McNaughton is starting for the Cardinals. He apparently is a reliever coming in. I already know the answer that you don't know much about him, but are you pulling him up like I am right now, trying to figure out who this guy is?
I do know that you added a Mick to his name.
I added a what?
Naughton. Packy Naughton, who sounds like he was imported from like 1896. Like this guy was on Mr. Burns's Ringers team with Mordecai Three Finger Brown and Cap Anson. But yeah, 26-year-olds. Looks like a middling type prospect. I don't think there's very much here. Ranked 18th on their prospect board coming into this year, but as a 26-year-old. So he's like a quad A type pitcher. Has seen 3 innings so far this season out of the pen. So I don't really expect him to go very deep. And we can see if he's stretched out when we get to that game. But yeah, don't really know too much about him in general.
All right, 6.35 ERA last year as a reliever. That is not great, but yeah, we can talk about him more as we get there. Any general overview of the slate that anything that sticks out to you on the slate, or you just want to start going game by game?
Despite losing Waino, I think it's a ridiculously deep pitching slate. I wrote about it today. I spent a ton of time in the pitching section of my article this afternoon, and I think you could go any different direction with pitching. There are 4 premium aces. There's a bunch of guys that are like right there at that next tier. There's young guys, there's old guys. Like there's a lot of different directions to go for pitching. So it's a fun slate. I really enjoy the shape of this one, and it should be fun to build 150 lineups for.
Yeah, it really is a fun pitching slate. But we got 12 games and no games, as far as I can tell, with the total over 5. So, no real team stacks that totally stick out to me. Just a lot of low team totals. I need them to juice the balls again, or I need to just get hot. I need some higher score in baseball. But maybe you can have fun with this.
Well, that's what I was saying. I mean, in my article, I said it. Everybody's talking about this is the new dead ball era. I think it's even more than a dead ball. I think I described it as the zombie apocalypse era, because these pitchers are coming out, these hitters, with like elite heat that they didn't have in the previous dead ball era. So these guys are not only not able to hit the ball out of the yard anymore, they're just getting flat out attacked in the zone. So this is the zombie apocalypse of baseball right now to me. And yeah, the offense is just gone right now. So it should be interesting to try and find some and talk through these different game by game scenarios.
Yeah, I don't personally love the dead ball era or whatever, the zombie apocalypse era. I prefer a little bit more scoring, but I know there are some baseball purists who would prefer it this way, I guess. But I do
love me a tight, like 2-1 ball game, pitching duel. Baseball's a game of suspense. It's a game of anticipation, right? So there's nothing like that creates anticipation like a tight ball game, but I do like to see a home run every now and then. Like that's a fun way to play the game too. So it's interesting this year.
All right. We got a 12 gamer, so let's jump into it. We got the New York Mets. We're going to get complaints if we don't, Terry. We got the New York Mets at the Washington Nationals. Carlos Carrasco has been confirmed as the starter for the Mets, and we got Patrick Corbin on the mound for the Nationals. The Mets with a 4.7 implied run total, Nationals at 4. Terry, how are you feeling about Carlos Carrasco on this slate, or the Nationals bats on the other side?
Carrasco in the middle of the board is kind of interesting. Coming into the year is off of a short year last year, coming back from cancer, and is a guy who's been injury prone throughout his career. But when he's on the mound, he's typically pretty good. This year, 23.1% strikeout rate, a 3.33 xFIP, a 1.0 WHIP, inducing a 13.8% swinging strike rate, has kept hard contact down. On a deep slate, he's just kind of on the board for me. He ranks like a third of the way down our top pitchers tool. What I do like is just nobody's going to him. So there's a ton of leverage on Carlos Carrasco today. 8,700, 8,600 across the 2 sites is a fair price. You can definitely use him. The Nats, it's a lineup with, we talk about it a lot. They've got Juan Soto in there. They've got Josh Bell. They've got Nelson Cruz. Not a ton else. So I'm not really concerned about the lineup. I just think that there's potentially opportunity cost with some of the other guys, but as a mix and match option, it's easy enough to get over 0.5% of ownership. If you want to go to 5-10% across 150 lineups of Carrasco, I think it's a good spot.
Yeah, positive leverage, as you mentioned, coming in 0.8% owned, 7.8% chance to be in a top two pitcher. So gotta love that leverage. And he is a talented pitcher. So I'm with you. I'd like to get at least over the field on Carrasco. Maybe I'm not going to go, 30%, but I'll be going over the field there. What about Washington on the other side? Are you going to be playing any Nationals in your lineups or doing any full stacks?
I do tend to get one-offs of Soto. I'll take one-offs of Nelson Cruz, despite the 157, 250, 245 with a .088 ISO over 117 plate appearances. Nelson, if you're out there, it's getting concerning, pal. I know you're getting old, but come on, let's bring the power back. So I will in limited quantities because they're all very low owned as well outside of Juan Soto. But he's the most interesting hitter in that lineup. I'll take some shares of him as a one-off. I'll take limited shares of their stacks. But I do like the Carrasco side of that one. I think he's very interesting on this slate.
Okay. And then on the other side of the game, we've got Patrick Corbin on the mound going up against the Mets. The Mets have a 4.7 implied run total. So they're one of the higher on the board, maybe even the highest on the board. How are you feeling about Corbin and his 19.3% strikeout rate, or how are you feeling about stacking up against him?
Yeah, I agree with our top stacks tool today. I think the Mets are one of the top end stacks. They're ranked at the top of our board on both sites. They're drawing some popularity, but it's not crushingly popular. They're in the mid-teens on both sites, and there's a ton of places to dump ownership into in second stacks in pitching that's low owned. You could roster the Mets, a 4-man Mets stack with their pitcher, and then a 3-man and a one-off from another team, and be perfectly fine having offset all that ownership with their pitcher. So I think that's one approach, but there's plenty of places to dump this ownership into. So top end of the Mets lineup: Nimmo, Kana, Lindor, Alonso, JD Davis, Starling Marte, Eduardo Escobar. All of those guys you can definitely get to in spades here against Patrick Corbin, who I will not roster on this slate as a pitcher. He's a target for me at this point in his career. 19.3% strikeout rate, like you mentioned, 9.3% swinging strike, a 1.81 whip so far this season. He walked 9.6%. He's given up 43.6% hard hit. I'm getting big time power numbers for guys like Peter Alonso, the righties on this team, plus Francisco Lindor, the switch hitter. Nimmo, like I said, I really like for a correlated scoring piece. So up and down the Mets lineup, you can take or leave James McCann, take or leave Jeff McNeil. As far as I'm concerned, McNeil back on the positive side of the BABIP equation, so he's looking good so far this year. But he'll always live and die with whether or not those dink and dunk singles fall in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think the best thing I can say about Patrick Corbin here is that he's cheap at 5,700 on DraftKings and coming in at 0.5% ownership. He does have positive leverage with a 5% chance of being one of the top two pitchers on the slate and a 17.3% chance of being one of the top value pitchers on the slate. So there are some things going for Patrick Corbin here, but yeah, he's definitely not a target of mine. And I'm with you. The Mets look really good. As you mentioned, they are the number one team in terms of top stack odds today with an 8.8% chance of being the top stack on the board. So they are looking plenty good against Corbin.
Corbin, somebody who you're considering in play for that low end starter at price roll though? Because I mean, 5,700 is an aggressively low price. For me, I don't think I would go there. Is he on your board for limited shares as that value option on DK?
Yeah, so he's in on the board in terms of I'm not going to rule him out, which I never really do. I rarely X out a player. So sure. For me, it's if I get to any shares of him, just doing a crunch with Fantasy Cruncher. Currently, I ran a crunch of 500 lineups. I have a total of 1 share of Corbin. So he's not really sticking out in terms of his median projection he's not making it into my lineup. So I don't really feel the need to force him in there. As you said, he's just not that great of a pitcher at this stage of his career. I don't know what his upside really is, even at that salary. So I don't think I'm probably going to get to any Corbin today either.
Yeah, I agree. And look, if it was 1 share, if it was 5 shares, I don't think you're doing yourself too much damage there at price. And we'll move on from this real quick in just a second. But I do think there are other good value pitchers within a similar type of a range. So that's why I wanted to find out where you were. I just think there's major expectation for production from this Mets offense today.
Yeah, I think I'd rather go to the Mets side as well. Anything else you want to say about this game before we move on?
No, just that I think I stabilized my camera. I think I was shaking a little bit as I was enthusiastically talking and shucking and jiving in my seat here. So hopefully I stabilized a little bit.
Excited about the Mets. I get it. You're
apparently
just really into it. All the New York teams, apparently. Let's move on. Blue Jays at Yankees. Here's your team. The New York team that you actually love. We've got the Blue Jays with a 3.4 run implied total. The Yankees at 4.3. We've got Yusei Kikuchi on the mound for Toronto and Luis Severino going on for the Yankees. How do you feel about Kikuchi today, and how do you feel about your Yankees on the other side?
This is another lefty target for me in terms of stacking up against him. I'm going to be taking out shares of the Yanks against Kikuchi here. I do think, as opposed to Corbin, for Kikuchi, I do think there's a little bit of value at that 6,600 price on DK. At 74 on FanDuel, I'm not going to touch him. I think there's way too many options to go to on the single pitcher site. You don't need it. At that value price on DK and only 0.5% owned, I think you can get away with some shares of him as a value pitcher, because he is a guy who had a 24.5% strikeout rate last year, 21.5% this year, not very good, but there are a lot of strikeouts in this Yankees lineup, right? You know, there's a few quality hitters, but all of their power hitters strike out at an aggressively high rates. So I think there's a thin lane through which Kikuchi might string together 6 clean innings, just happen to get one of those Yankees performances where they swing and miss anytime somebody's on base and gets sat down, and he stumbles into 6 clean innings, 5-6 strikeouts, and is okay for that price. I think it's much more likely he's going to get dinged up by these Yankees. Extremely right-handed heavy power hitting lineup. He's given up a 49.2% hard hit rate this year, a 47% hard hit rate last year, 11% barrels last year, 10.2% barrels this year. I think he's very targetable for power, for home run upside. He puts too many guys on base with a 155 whip, so that's going to lead to some run scoring. I really like the Yankees stack side of this, but I could be talked into a few shares, like I said, on DK for the price for the strikeout upside.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised to see the Yankees not coming up near the top of the board in terms of top stack odds. Only a 4.7% chance to be in the top stack on DraftKings. They do have positive leverage, though, coming in at only 3% owned. So I really like the Yankees today on DraftKings, despite not coming in as high as I would really expect for them.
And I thought they'd be a little higher up as well. Sorry to jump in there, but we're also dealing with a day where the top ranked Mets are at an 8.8% probability. So nobody over 10. It's just one of those days where we've got a big, broad plateau. And I think that's a product of a lot of very good pitching. Like we talked about, there's only a few spots where good teams are going up against gas cans. There's also, some of the gas cans are facing mediocre kind of offenses. So it's just a really interesting slate that way.
Yeah, it's really a spread out kind of slate. I agree. Yeah. It's very interesting. And then on the other side of the game, we've got Luis Severino going up against the Blue Jays. Always a dangerous offense. Do you have interest in Severino or the Blue Jays on the other side?
Yeah, that'll be a both sides are for me. The Blue Jays are just too under owned. They're everybody on the team under 1% owned on both sides. That's just wrong. This team should never be that low owned. I don't care who they're going up against. Luis Severino pitching effectively, but not at an elite level. 22.3% strikeout rate over 24 innings. He's given up 36.1% hard hit, 5.6% barrel rate, both of which are slightly below average, around average. A 3.48 xFIP is good, but a 1.29 whip is too many guys on base. 12.3% swinging strike rate is pretty effective, but only a 26.1% CSW. So he's been okay. He's been good. I am going to definitely take out shares of him at 7,700 on FanDuel, 79 on DK. I think he's very interesting on both sides. I do think there's more strikeout upside than we've seen so far, but he's going up against a very, very good team. So I want to temper expectations. I just love getting to a pitcher with that much talent, that much strikeout upside against basically anybody when he comes in at in the 7,000s on either site for, what I think is pretty fair ownership. So that's a both sides are for me.
Yeah, I think so for me too. Both sides look really good. A very solid pitcher with some strikeout upside and a great offense on the other side. So it makes sense to go to both sides. Obviously, not in the same lineup. I think our viewers probably know by now that you don't play bats against your pitcher on a 12-game slate, but worth saying anyway. Anything else you want to say about this game? Yeah.
Yeah, just in terms of that, of who to look for in that Blue Jays stack. I mean, the names up top are fairly obvious. George Springer, Bo Bichette, Vladdy Guerrero, Teoscar Hernandez back in this lineup now, so don't overlook him. He's still too cheap. 4,300 is way too cheap for him on DK, 3,100 on FanDuel also. Lourdes Gurriel, Matt Chapman, you can grab at the back end of the lineup. Alejandro Kirk, Santiago Espinal, and Tyler Heineman, you can take or leave in stacks, but all those other guys are pretty targetable at super low ownership and affordable prices.
Okay. Yep. Sounds good. Let's move on to the nemesis of the Yankees, Boston Red Sox at Atlanta Braves. Red Sox with a 3.6 run implied total, Braves at 4.1. We've got Garrett Whitlock on the mound for Boston, going up against Kyle Wright for the Braves. Let's start with Whitlock. Do you have any interest in Whitlock? He's looked great through his first 3 starts in MLB, but he's going up against a pretty dangerous Braves team with a 4.1 run implied total. What are you liking in this? Are you going to be playing Whitlock, or are you going to be targeting him with Braves bats, or both?
Yeah, I think Whitlock is interesting here. He's one of the young guys that I mentioned at the top of the show. He's coming in with pretty strong positive leverage marks on the DK board, and I assume it's the same on FanDuel. Let me jump over to the update. Yeah, so same thing on the FanDuel slate. He's ranked around 10, maybe just outside the top 10 on a 24 pitcher site in terms of probability of success. But again, if we're looking at like the FanDuel board, he's around 10th with a 4.2% probability of being the top pitcher. Justin Verlander ranks up top at 7.5%. So it's not like we're talking about there's, one or two options out in the 25% range and we're grabbing somebody under 5% probable. Everybody's on a plateau today. So I think you're playing the leverage game here. You're playing the price game. He's a high-end strikeout pitcher right now. I assume it's going to come down over time, but right now, 35.8% over 21 2/3. Last year, 73 1/3 out of the bullpen was 27.2%. I expect he'll settle more in that range, but he's going up against a Braves lineup that is elite for everything, but definitely has some strikeout in it. This year so far, the Braves active roster against right-handed pitching, 28th in baseball with a 25.4% strikeout rate. They've got a second ranked 3.67% home run rate and a third ranked 182 ISO in the split. So they're definitely dangerous, creating runs 9% better than average, 12th in the split. But there are plenty of strikeouts here. So if he can find his way through clean a few times, I expect him to put up a nice fantasy score for the salary and for the total lack of ownership. The question is whether he can get through the lineup a few times. And there are minor questions lingering about the pitch count. The last time out, even he pitched, he had a, let me pull it up. He had a 9 strikeout game against the Angels the last time out. He only used 78 pitches through 5 innings, and then they took him out of the game in a 2-run game. Gave up a home run, struck out 9. So there's minor questions about that, but I like him to have at least 90 pitches if he needs them. So I think this is a good spot for Whitlock here against a very, very good team that I will take some shares out against him with the other side with these elite bats.
Okay. Do you think it'll be close to even with the field? Will you be actually targeting Braves bats? They're coming in at on DraftKings. They're coming in at 3.4% projected ownership with a 3.7% chance of being the top stack. I suppose I should just have FanDuel open when I'm talking to you because you play more on FanDuel. It's probably more speaking your language when I'm looking at FanDuel. They're coming in at 4.1% ownership on Braves stacks with a 4.2% chance of being the top stack. Are you targeting that, or do you think you're going to be close to the field? Well, what's your plan there? Uh-oh. Am I frozen?
No, you're good, Neil.
I'm good.
Yeah, you're good. Terry entered the Matrix. So
oh no.
Yep. Yeah.
I just assumed it was me. All right. Well then
Yeah.
I will do Terry's part here. We'll miss Terry while he's gone. I'm actually getting
there he goes. Hold on.
All right. We got
All right, you're good now. You're at least on the screen to where they can see you now. So I'll let you know when Terry gets back in here.
Okay, so you can see me. We're talking about Braves bats. I was just saying that they have some positive leverage based on the top stacks tool, coming in at relatively low ownership on FanDuel, coming in at 4.1% ownership with a 4.2% chance of being the top stack. So very neutral there, but you can target a young pitcher who has not been a starter many times in the league. I think it's a fine spot to target the Braves. Garrett Whitlock is not the kind of pitcher that I love to target, but I imagine that I will be getting to close to the field, right around 4% Garrett Whitlock on FanDuel. And then on DraftKings, he's coming in even lower owned at right around 3%. So I think I will be probably above the field on DraftKings with 3% ownership, 3.7% chance being the top stack on the board. I imagine I'll be getting to some Braves. And then in terms of bats that I'm getting to for the Braves in particular, I'm getting to, let me look at my stacks. I'm getting to a lot of Adam Duvall currently. I think that's just a matter of his price looking a little bit too good. At 2,600 on DraftKings. Yeah, I'm getting to Adam Duvall in a good number of my Brave stacks. Travis Demeritte, bottom of the order, looking good. I think it's just a value play with those guys. Travis Demeritte coming in at 2,000 with Duvall at 2,600. So they allow you to do a lot with the rest of your lineup. And then I'm also getting to play Matt Olson. All right, great. Terry is back.
Hey,
are you ready to talk some Braves bats?
I've been talking about it. Where you been? I don't know what the hell just happened there. My whole my computer went zoop and just closed. Not really sure why. Sorry about that, gang.
Oh, no worries. We still I didn't move on past the Braves bats because I didn't want to skip over something that you want to talk about. Is there anything that's super interesting to you about the Braves bats, or what's your interest level?
Let me tell you what, I'm reopening my spreadsheet here, so it's just going to take a half a second, but I'm always interested in the Braves bats. I would have to let me see where they are on terms of the leverage on our stacks board here. They're one of the teams that I'm always looking to get to. They've just got elite power on both sides of the plate. They get on base pretty significantly. Why am I not even just seeing this? This is just got me all out of sorts here. Middle of the top stacks board going up against Whitlock. There they are, 3.7% probability and efficiently owned. So I would target them. I wish Whitlock was a little bit more popular so you could target some leverage there, but he's not really. You're not getting that benefit. But yeah, I think against a young pitcher, there's plenty of reason to target the Braves here. It's a both sides.
All right. And then on the other side of the game, we've got Kyle Wright up against the Red Sox. What's your interest level in Kyle Wright? He has a 30.6% strikeout rate so far this year, so that looks really good if you trust it. What are you thinking in terms of Kyle Wright or the Boston Bats going up against him?
Yeah, that's another spot. I'll probably have more Wright than Boston just because Boston's just been bad so far this year. They've been inexplicably underperforming so far this year. I will grab some shares of the Boston stack just going up against a young, somewhat unproven pitcher. Wright's interesting. They were talking about him on the show this morning, and he's got this reputation as if he, was kind of a bust of a prospect. He's been a well-regarded prospect throughout his growth throughout his minor league career, and people tend to think of him in those terms because he's been around since 2018 when he made his major league debut. He just this season in his last start passed the 100 innings pitch mark in his career. So he hasn't even pitched a full season despite having been, up and down in parts of 18, 19, 20, and 21. So people just think that he's been around for a little bit of time. He's been a kid with a 24, 25% strikeout rate through the minors. I think he'll come back down toward that level. I don't think he's going to pitch all season above 30%, but I think 24, 25 is reasonable to expect. He's just at a ridiculously high price. He's the highest priced pitcher on FanDuel. He's he's one of only two pitchers behind Justin Verlander, priced over 10,000 on DK. So it's tough to justify those prices, but I think that pushes everybody else away from what I do think is a good pitcher. So coming back to it with only 2% of the field there on FanDuel, I'll have some shares. I'll probably be over the field. I don't love paying that price to do it, but I'll probably get there.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. On DraftKings coming in at 5.3% ownership with a 16.4% chance of being the top two pitcher. He is the best leverage pitcher on the board with 11.1% leverage. So that looks really good for Kyle Wright. Yeah, the price is a little bit higher than you're wanting to pay. The matchup against the Red Sox is not something that I love, but still, he's coming in too low owned for the talent that he's shown so far this year. What about the Red Sox? Are you going to be targeting Wright at all with the Red Sox, hoping that maybe it's not for real?
Yeah, they're under-owned enough and under-owned relative to their talent and their talent at price, particularly on the FanDuel slate. You're getting Rafael Devers at 37, JD at 38, Xander at 35, all under 10% owned with JD under 2% and Xander under 5%. So I like that top end of this lineup. Trevor Story underperforming for the season at 194, 276, 269. He's a hell of a lot better than that. So I'll take shares of him at 6. I'll take some shares of Franchy Cordero and play the home run game at 2,200 in the 7th spot. No Bobby Dahlbeck in there, unfortunately, for me today to talk about, but managed to work his name in anyway. So yeah, in limited shares, I'll have some Red Sox, but kind of low expectations. They've just, like I said, been underperforming, and I do think Wright has got something going.
All right. Anything else that you want to say about this game before I tell the listeners about the Awesemo Plus weekly pass?
Yeah, why don't you take that opportunity, and I'll take the opportunity to make sure I'm back to where I was before everything, the whole world blew up.
All right. While Terry is checking in on the Matrix, let me tell you about the Awesemo Plus weekly pass. You can get access to all great Awesemo Plus tools and content for nearly every DFS sport out there with an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. This includes full access to all the premium content and tools on Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, top golfers, lineup builder, and much more. Of course, if you're only looking to play MLB DFS, then you can sign up for one of our Awesemo Plus MLB packages for as low as $18.95 weekly. Please note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and can easily be added with these packages at checkout, but is not included in our base packages. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Terry, how are things looking in the Matrix?
I think we're pretty good. I think I was just checking if I used the autosave version, and I think we've got all the stuff I had updated earlier. So I think we're good.
Okay. And Brian was asking, did you take the red pill or the blue pill while you're out in the Matrix?
Oh shit, I forget which one's which, and I know there's a whole thing with it these
days.
Red
pill is reality.
I'm not going to answer until I can confirm which side I'm actually on. I forget which way that question goes.
In terms of the Matrix, red pill is reality, blue pill is like a beautiful facade.
Ooh, yeah, but hasn't it been flipped, and it's a whole thing.
It's now it's like it's a men's rights activist thing. It's like, so now it's a bad thing. Now
I
it's
don't
not
know which
something that
one.
I don't love.
Yeah, I want to be on the good side of that. I like women and women like me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think it's sort of flipped, but I haven't really followed that closely either. But from the Matrix perspective, I would say red pill, but it's kind of flipped. Yeah. But anyway, we'll move
bring
on
me
to
out
the
of the
next
Matrix. Help me. I'll fight the revolution. Let's down with the machines. Yeah, let's do that.
Exactly.
All right, but let's be friends with women at the same time.
Agreed. On the same page there. All right, let's move on to the Houston Astros at my Minnesota Twins. We've got two great pitchers on the mound, Verlander for the Astros, Joe Ryan for the Twins. Astros have a 3.6 run implied total, Twins with 3.1. Let's start with Verlander. Do you have interest? I imagine you have some interest in Verlander up on the mound against the Twins. Do you have any interest in stacking against him with the Twins? And what is your interest level in Verlander?
Yeah, I think Verlander's definitely interesting. He's pulling in the highest, the highest probability of being a top 2 starter on the DK slate. Still, I think the highest probability of being a top individual on the FanDuel slate. And he's at negative leverage, but it's thin, and it's thin overall ownership. On FanDuel, owned under 10% overall for 10,800. You're paying not quite the Kyle Wright price, but you're paying a pretty penny for him. But I think under 10% ownership, you can get away with a lot of shares there and not really sweat the leverage. Like, I'd rather attack that, I think, than say Robbie Ray at 18.5% ownership, who I do not believe in entirely, who's going up against a Phillies lineup. Even for the 2,000 price difference, I'd just rather be in the Justin Verlander business against this Twins team that they do have good power. They do have good run creation, but against right-handed pitching so far this year, they're 20th in baseball with a 24.3% strikeout rate. So I can definitely get behind the idea of Justin Verlander going out and carving this team up a couple times over and putting up a monster fantasy score here. It's probably going to be more tempered than that. I think he'll be more, I think a lot of these premium guys are going to be around that same good, but not amazing score, and it's just going to be a matter of finding the right one. So if I'm betting on Justin Verlander to be that guy, I'm happy to do it at under 10% ownership on FanDuel, 21% ownership, 10-4 on DK. I think it's the same story over there. So yeah, you can get to that. You can back it up with some Twin shares as insurance if you want to, and play that home run and run creation game with them. Byron Buxton, Max Kepler, Gary Sanchez. I can take those guys in my lineup, maybe a little Alex Kirilloff, but I don't love going up against Verlander in most situations. So maybe a few shares just as insurance if I get overweight to Verlander.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There's positive leverage there. We talked about it last week, though, that anytime you're playing these teams, the Twins have a 1.5% chance of being top stack on the board, but there is some opportunity cost there. There are other teams that also have positive leverage, so I'm probably not going to be going overboard with the Twins either, but maybe I'll have a few shares just as you mentioned, a little bit of insurance against all of my Verlander shares. That makes sense. What about the other side of the game? Do you have interest in Joe Ryan, who has had a great career so far, but is not getting a lot of ownership and actually doesn't look that great in the top pitchers duel, but 26.4% K rate. Do you have any interest there going up against the Astros, or are you going to be targeting the Astros up against Joe Ryan?
Ryan is such a wild card on this slate. He's going to be super interesting to watch, to see what happens to him tonight going up against a really, really good Astros lineup here. I think the prices are keeping people away, maybe a little lack of name recognition still, even though he's been excellent over the first couple of starts here. But the Astros, to bring it around to that point to start with, 10% better than average creating runs against righties, a 3.52 home run rate, ranks third over in baseball against righties, 171 team ISO, ranks 7th in baseball against righties. So all the power numbers in general are down, but that's a good ISO for this year in the split. And, you're talking about a kid 27 and 2/3 into his major league career this year, 26 and 2/3 in 5 starts last year, 26.4% strikeout rate this year. Very, very good. 3.71 xFIP, a 12.7% swinging strike rate. But just going up against a stingy team that knows how to hit, knows how to sequence, knows how to get on base, hits for power, I worry about him. I do think it's worth getting over the field just because he's owned at 0.5% on both sites. And he does have an extreme talent. He is very, very talented, very good. 94, maybe we'll see him climb up over that, especially if he does well here. But throughout the season, we might see him get up over that price. So why not grab a few shares, even against a really good Astros team when he's that low owned? So with limited expectations, I can take some shares of Joe Ryan here as well. You can hear me say that a lot today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely on the same page there, and maybe it's the homer in me, but I think it's the 0.5% ownership too on DraftKings, with a 6% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 1.6% chance of being a top 2 value pitcher. He is the kind of pitcher that if I weren't getting any shares of Joe Ryan, I would probably force him in a little bit, just because I do think he has that upside that I'd like to
I
get
think that
there.
makes sense.
Yeah, he's not a Patrick Corbin where I think, what's really the upside? Why force him in? I can, do just as well with other pitchers. I feel like Joe Ryan actually has that kind of upside that I'm probably gonna give him a little boost. I didn't get to any shares of Joe Ryan in my latest crunch of 500, so it looks like I'm gonna have to give him a little bit of a boost. But I think I'd like to get above that 0.5% that the field is coming in at.
He's projecting in the same range for me. He, on in FanDuel projections, he's coming in at like a 25 in my projections, which has him a little low comparative to some of the other options on the board, and particularly for price. So I'm going to have to nudge him, but I will definitely nudge him.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anything else about this game that you want to touch on before we move on?
Now everybody knows I love Astros bats on any given slate, so you can grab those guys. And we kind of went through it, but just to make sure that people don't miss that, it's definitely grab some Astros bats going against the kid here too.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on to the Orioles at the Cardinals. I've got the Orioles at a 3.6 run implied total. I'm not sure how much that is going to change because we had Adam Wainwright in as a starting pitcher when I did this run sheet. Now we've got Packy Naughton. Maybe the Orioles come up a little bit. I'm going to have some interest there, I think, going up against an unknown pitcher. But let's start with the other side of the game. Do you have interest in Kyle Bradish today going up against the Cardinals or the Cardinals and their 4.5 run implied total on the other side?
Probably. I mean, I'll definitely have some Cardinals. They're a little bit higher owned than I expected. They rank out a little bit better on our top stacks tool than I expected, just given their general struggles against right-handed pitching. But you're talking about going up against a rookie with 10 innings under his belt, 12.2% strikeout rate for Bradish so far, a 4.99 xFIP. So there are good reasons to expect that this very talented Cardinals lineup is going to come around against this particular right-handed pitcher. So yeah, Tommy Edman, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, Tyler O'Neill can be in my lineups pretty much any day. And then Juan Yepes, Dylan Carlson, Harrison Bader are interesting. Bottom two, maybe not with Yadi Molina and Edmundo Sosa down there, but 1 through 7, I can definitely stack Cardinals here. They're just a little popular, just a little expensive at the top end on DK, affordable and popular on the FanDuel slate. Don't think I'll get to any shares of Bradish here. Don't think I need any shares of Packy Naughton. I was in the meantime here trying to get Packy into the update here so we could see how that impacted the Orioles. And as you probably expected, the Orioles went up a little bit in terms of my power index, in terms of where they're projecting out.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Kyle Bradish is a pitcher that I had targeted early on because he had a pretty decent strikeout rate in AAA, but it has not panned out in the majors at all with that 12.2% K rate, 6.17 expected ERA. So I don't imagine I'm going to get into a lot of Bradish either. I was just pointed out in chat. Wallace Crenshaw points out that this is the hottest game on the slate too, which of course is baked into the implied run total projections for the game, but for the Cardinals at least so far is pretty high, and the Orioles, as you mentioned, is going to be going up. So how much do you think you're going to be playing the Orioles up against Packy Naughton?
Let's see where the ownership goes, because it is still a very limited team. They've been a little bit more frisky recently. I believe it was like 7% above average creating runs against right-handed pitching so far this year. They've gotten up to 15th in baseball, 7% above average. They're 16th with a 22% strikeout rate. Their power numbers are limited, even for this year, below a 2% home run rate, 131 team ISO against righties. So it's not great, but there are hitters that I do believe in and that I do like. It's basically the top 5 from Cedric Mullins, Trey Mancini, Anthony Santander, Austin Hayes, and Ryan Mountcastle. You can use Jorge Mateo from the bottom of the lineup as a wraparound, 2,200 on DK, 2,400 on FanDuel. All you need this guy to do is get on base. He's got 9 stolen bases so far this year. He's a good correlation play. He's just not very good at getting on base. That's his biggest problem. So he's got an okay hit tool. He's got an okay low end power tool for the speedy infielder. They were comparing him yesterday to Jonathan VR, which I think is somewhat apt. If he comes around, he'll have a Jonathan VR like couple of years. So I do like Mateo for the speed and correlation option as a wraparound if you want to build a 4-man or a 5-man with a different 5th man in it from that top end. But it's really about that top end. They're all cheap. They're all low owned. They'll probably go up in ownership as we get toward lock. So watch that. If they get outrageously popular, then you can just get away from it easy enough. It's not that great a spot.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anything else you want to say about this game before we move on?
I do like the power of the home run marks for Goldschmidt, Arenado, O'Neill, and Juan Yepes. One of those guys seem pretty likely to hit a home run tonight.
Okay. Sounds good. So we'll be playing some Cardinals bats, maybe some Cardinals stacks as well.
Cards.
Yeah, going up against Bradish. And then, I have interest in the Orioles just going up against an unknown pitcher. I'm definitely going to be playing some Orioles bats here. Kind of TBD how much, but I imagine I'll be getting above the field on the Orioles just because love targeting an unknown situation. And this is kind of an unknown situation against a pitcher we don't know much about. All right, let's move on to the Kansas City Royals at the Texas Rangers. We've got Brad Keller on the mound for the Royals, Martin Perez on the mound for the Rangers. The Royals with a 3.8 run implied total, Rangers at 4.4. Let's start with Brad Keller. Do you have any interest there or the Rangers on the other side?
No, this one's all about bats for me. I would only be looking at bats. I don't like either of these pitchers. Martin Perez is somebody I've avoided for years and certainly not going back to him for an 18.3% strikeout rate. Brad Keller is somebody I thought 2 years ago might be interesting based on a ton of ground balls. And, I thought he would find more strikeouts. He just hasn't. 16.5% this year. Even if he's good at keeping the ball on the ground, he's just not a fantasy relevant pitcher, especially on a deep slate like this. And especially at 9,000 on the FanDuel slate. That is just an absurd price. So neither pitcher in this game.
Okay, neither pitcher, but you do have some interest in targeting the Rangers and their 4.4 run implied total against Keller.
I think they're at least on the board. They're the hitters that I would want outside of Adolis Garcia in this lineup are kind of owned, though. I guess maybe you could talk me into some Colt Calhoun at low ownership on both sites and a very low price, but he's kind of struggled out of the gate so far this year. Only one home run, a 0.56 ISO, creating runs 75% worse than average. The team's just been underperforming in general so far this season. So I don't love it. I don't love that the Brad Millers, Marcus Semien, Corey Seagers of the world are all owned over 10%. So limited expectations, but Keller's just not a good pitcher. So you can definitely throw bats at him. Just figure out how to put them together in unique combinations.
All right, that makes sense. And then on the other side, you say you don't have any interest in Martin Perez. What about targeting some Royals bats against him? Do you think you'll be doing any full stacks of the Royals or maybe just some one-offs or short stacks?
Similar kind of a situation where Bobby Witt Jr. and Sal Perez, who I would really want to get to from this lineup, are both very popular in the mid-teens on a big slate. Andrew Benintendi is a lefty spot here against a bad lefty. I guess you can get to maybe some Hunter Dozier, Emmanuel Rivera, MJ Melendez. It really trails off. Whit Merrifield batting down toward the bottom of the lineup. Maybe you use Whit as a wraparound to like Whit Merrifield as a wraparound to Witt Jr., Benintendi, Sal Perez, Hunter Dozier, and do a 5-man that way. I would prefer it as one-offs if Sal and Bobby Witt Jr. were lower owned. You can get away with either one of them. It's not like they're 40% owned, but I don't love it. But I do think it's an interesting spot, at least going up against a bad lefty here.
Yeah, and in Texas, which is usually a pretty decent ballpark for hitting. And anything else that you want to say about this game before we move on?
No, we can jump out of this one.
All right, before we move on to the next game, let me tell you about our sponsor, OddsShopper. Make your best bets in 30 seconds or less. OddsShopper features hundreds of bets daily to give you the edge you need betting NBA and NHL player props with expected win percentages and ROIs included. OddsShopper uses the same DFS projections we use here at Awesemo to filter out the best bets available. OddsShopper also features a parlay builder with optimized parlays and an arbitrage tool that identifies risk-free, guaranteed profit bets that you can make across sportsbooks. You can find the link to OddsShopper in the description of this video, so head over there and start making smarter bets now. All right, we've got the Cleveland Guardians.
Risk-free, guaranteed profit.
I said risk-free. You just got to use that arbitrage tool. Yeah, you just got to make one bet on one site. Make sure you're not doing it on the same book so you don't get limited. But you can. It's a pretty cool tool there that I can't use here in Minnesota. But if I could, I would. All right. We've got the Cleveland Guardians going up against the Chicago White Sox. Cal Quantrill on the mound for Cleveland, Lucas Giolito for the White Sox. Guardians with a 3.2 run implied total, the White Sox with 4.4. We'll start with the side that I'm guessing you probably aren't interested in, which is Cal Quantrill. But also, what about the White Sox? Do you have interest in the White Sox bats here?
Yeah, I do have interest in the White Sox bats. They're a little bit more limited version of what I was just talking about with those other teams, where the popular hitters are drawing, the best hitters are drawing some popularity, but it's not quite as high, particularly on DK. It's more around 10% than the mid-teens. So I actually like that spot even more. So definitely can get to some Tim Anderson, Juan Moncada, Jose Abreu, Luis Robert, Yasmani Grandal, even Gavin Sheets, AJ Pollock, Adam Engel toward the back end of this lineup. I wouldn't call you crazy if you threw Josh Harrison in there too, honestly. So yeah, top to bottom, this lineup plays pretty well. Quantrill, 14.8% strikeouts this year, 13% walks, 509 xFIP. I think we can see a target forming there. Last year, over 149 and 2/3, under a 20% strikeout rate at 19.6, so 443 xFIP. He's a fairly targetable pitcher. He's a kid who came in with a decent pedigree, hasn't really put it all together at the major league level yet, does have some talent, but I won't be going there for pitching, and I will be going to the opposing bats in the White Sox.
Yep. Kind of what I figured, and I'm kind of on the same page. Not going to get into any Quantrill, but I imagine I'll be getting to a good amount of White Sox today. On the other side, here's a pitcher that I'm guessing you do have more interest than Quantrill, which is Lucas Giolito on the mound for the White Sox. Are you going to be playing any Giolito today? And then on the other side, are you going to be kind of getting contrarian and playing any Cleveland stacks?
Yeah, out of the elite four that we've got on this slate, Giolito's the guy who comes in with the best leverage situation, the lowest raw ownership. When I was looking earlier, I think based on what I was saying before about Verlander, that's come back to the field a little bit around Verlander, but you still do see, like I was saying, Verlander 9.7% raw ownership total on the FanDuel slate. Giolito, similar talent, 500 cheaper, comes in at 6.1% ownership, closer to efficient, closer to positive leverage at negative 0.8 on the FanDuel slate. And it's similar on DK. He's 16% owned compared to a Verlander at 21 and Aaron Nola in the 30s, Robbie Ray pushing 30%. So he's roughly half as owned as those guys. And he is an equivalent, if not better pitcher than particularly Robbie Ray, but also, Justin Verlander, Aaron Nola. He's right there with those guys. So no reason not to go to him. Let me temper that. No pitching reason not to go to him. The matchup would be your concern here. Cleveland's active roster currently leading baseball with a 138 WRC plus against right-handed pitching and leading baseball with an 18.2% strikeout rate against right-handed pitching. Also a 178 ISO, 2.61% home run rate. The home run rate's in the middle of the league, so he might be a little bit safe from home runs. When he makes a mistake, there tend to be big, loud mistakes. 41% hard hit, 15.4% barrel rate. That doesn't play great with some power on the other side, but I really like the chances of Giolito going through this lineup a few times over. I would be surprised if he's not my highest owned pitcher today.
Yeah, I imagine I'll be going over the field on Giolito too. Just the way that I've kind of adjusted with pitching. I'm not always trying to get positive leverage. I'm trying to spread it out a little bit, but just trying to get to high upside pitchers in general. And Lucas Giolito obviously has about as high of upside as anybody. And then Cleveland actually looks pretty good in the top stacks tool, coming in at 1.4% ownership with a 3.6% chance to be in the top stack on the slate, 3.2% chance to be in the top value stack on the slate on FanDuel. So I would have a little bit of interest in Cleveland there. Is it enough that you're willing to take shots on Cleveland? You think they're going to make it into your 150 set?
I'll probably have some. I'm curious to see how it comes through my sort, because they are so low owned that will help them, push them up the way that I sort these things. But I would see it as more a spot. Like, I don't really see them blowing up Giolito completely here, where they're going to be a mandatory stack on such a big slate. Like, the odds that they're going to hang 10 runs on this pitcher are pretty slim. Even if he doesn't have a monster game against him, I see it more coming down as like a 4-3 game in that in that case, where they just do enough damage to him to shave him down in terms of how he relates to a Verlander or somebody else's upside. So that's kind of how I see it going. If it doesn't work out in Giolito's favor, I will have some minor shares of the Guardians here, though. Almost said it, just because of how they rate out and how they've performed. I just mentioned all the excellent performance so far against righties. I don't think that's real. I think they'll come back to earth as the season goes on. But for right now, I can grab some limited shares.
Okay, makes sense to me. Anything else you want to say about this game before we move on?
No, we can move on. We got a lot to go through.
Yep. All right. So we've got the Tampa Bay Rays going up against the Los Angeles Angels. Both teams have decent implied totals. Rays at 4.5, Angels at 4.2. So a relatively high scoring game. Despite having Corey Kluber on the mound for Tampa Bay, we've got Reed Detmers on the mound for the Angels. Let's start with Kluber. Do you have any interest in Corey Kluber coming in with his 23.8% strikeout rate? Any interest there going up against the Angels, or will you be targeting the Angels bats against him, or both?
At 8,500 and nobody going there, I can grab a few shares of Corey Kluber. I don't really believe 23% strikeout rate this year, 3.38 xFIP, a 1.05 whip. We saw this at the beginning of last season when he came off the injury list for the Yanks, and he was pretty good early on, fresh. Then he got dinged up. Then he was, went back to, relative mediocrity. The strikeouts were 24%. That was fine. But last year he walked 9.7%, 4.38 xFIP, a 1.34 whip. I think that's more the pitcher that Corey Kluber is. He's not terrible for contact. He's never going to be a major target for me, but I think going up against an Angels lineup with a few absolutely elite hitters in it and then a few young kids that are really performing pretty well, I don't love the spot, but with nobody there, like I said, I think you can grab a few shares of it based on the Angels strikeout upside and his ability to sit down some hitters. So limited shares so far this year, 24.7% strikeout rate against righties for the Angels. So he might find a decent start here. I just think by comparison to some of the other options, there are just so many more likely spots for pitching.
Yeah, I feel like early on in the year, I kind of thought the Angels were a team that had a few elite bats and then they were really bad everywhere else. But these young kids have come on and been doing really well. So it kind of doesn't seem like a lineup you really want to target as much as I expected.
If you watch some of the first shows of the year, I was talking about this lineup or read some of my articles. I was saying this 3-hitter lineup, this top heavy lineup, and I was considering that Trout, Ohtani, and Jared Walsh, and then Anthony Rendon has never been somebody I would cross off, but he's been struggling. So I wasn't even including him in that. But now that they're getting this performance from Taylor Ward, Brandon Marsh in this lineup, they're getting little bits and pieces from guys like Tyler Wade around the edges. So it's just it's a really interesting lineup now. It plays pretty well, pretty deep. Max Stassi is somebody I like calling out for a little bit of surprise power. If you need a catcher, Max Stassi at 4,600 and 0.6% ownership on DK, you could do worse than grabbing a few shares of him against Corey Kluber here. So this Angels lineup, the only two guys owned over 1% are Trout and Ohtani, and they're under 10%. I was not wild about getting to them. They were exploding through my model yesterday, exploding through my sort, and I kind of trim them down a little bit just because I expected them to be ridiculously popular. Turned out I didn't get to enough of them and probably hurt myself there. I love the pair of them when they're coming in under 10% on the DK slate. They're pushing 20% on FanDuel, and I'll probably still have some. So yeah, I will have some shares of this improved Angels lineup going up against Corey Kluber here.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. Same page there. What about the other side? We've got Reed Detmers on the mound for the Angels going up against the Rays. Are you going to be playing any Detmers, or do you have interest in the Rays bats in stacks or as one-offs?
I do have interest in the Rays bats. Just like the Guardians against righties, they've been excelling against left-handed pitching so far this season. They've got a 145 collective ISO, second in baseball in the split, second only to St. Louis's 152 against lefties so far this year. That's outrageous. But the team has also been very good at limiting strikeouts, only 17.7% in the split. The power is middling, 2.82% home run rate, but everybody's struggling for power this year. So I like going to Tampa Bay here against Detmers. Detmers is a fairly well-regarded prospect so far in the majors, 19.8% strikeout rate this year, 20 and 2/3 last year, 18.8% strikeout rate, has walked too many, has put too many guys on base in general. The biggest issue with him is that he shines in AAA because he's got a ridiculously good, he's got a plus curveball that's too advanced for AAA pitching. So he looks really, really good down there. But then when he comes up to the major league level, the rest of the stuff isn't quite there yet. It's not ready for prime time. So he gets knocked around, and then the curveball is also not as effective. So he's just going to get hit around until he develops a little bit more. So give me the Rays bats here. And I love that we can get to Yandy Diaz, Harold Ramirez, Brandon Lau, all under 10% ownership on the DK slate, all reasonably low owned on the FanDuel slate. People would be sleeping if Harold Ramirez, I think, did this lineup come out? Let me double check. It did. It just dropped, actually. Harold Ramirez is hitting third. So we've got Yandy, Wander Franco. It's exactly the projected lineup I was working. Oh, no, excuse me. Vidal Brujan is snuck in there at 8. He's actually kind of interesting. Premium prospect coming up in the 8 hole there. So another interesting bat switch hitter. I like getting to this, not to waste too much time on it. I like getting to this Rays stack, but Harold Ramirez, excellent for contact, 46% something hard hit rate of over 300 and change plate appearances last year, in the 50s so far this season, and excels at hitting lefty pitching. So I really like the Harold Ramirez addition to the 3 spot in that lineup. I can roster these guys at least 1 through 6. Don't sleep on Mike Zunino in there either.
All right, so a lot of interest in Tampa bats. Do you have any interest at all in Reed Detmers at 6,500 in FanDuel at 0.6% ownership?
I don't think I'm going to go there. I think you can get away with some shares at 7,100 on DK if you want to, but I think there's probably better spots. Like I said, I just don't think he's ready for the show yet. I think he's got some development left to do.
Yeah, makes sense. Anything else you want to say about this game before we move on to the next one?
No, like I said, that Rays lineup 1 through 6 is pretty interesting to me. And then with Vidal Brujan in there, I would definitely not sleep on him either. He's an interesting hitter.
All right, sounds good. Let's move on to the Philadelphia Phillies at Seattle Mariners. We've got Aaron Nola on the mound for the Phillies going up against Robbie Ray and the Mariners. Phillies with a 3.8 run implied total, Mariners 3.4. Kind of two interesting pitchers here, and maybe some low owned stacks. Let's start with Nola. Do you have any interest there going up against the Mariners, or do you think you're going to be playing any Mariners up against Nola?
Yeah, I'll always take shares of Aaron Nola. I think he's a spectacular pitcher. Improved so far this year over what were already very strong numbers from last year. So far this year, 34 2/3, 31.1% strikeout rate, 4.5% walks, a 2.56 xFIP, 11.5% swinging strike rate. Technically is a little bit down from last year, but he's making up for it by putting up a 0.87 whip compared to a 1.13 last year. He's just an excellent pitcher. I think the price is fair. I think the ownership is efficient, not egregiously bad. You can definitely get there on the FanDuel slate, and he is downright cheap at 8,900. DK's got him way too cheap for his talent. So definitely you can get there. This is a good Mariners lineup, but he shouldn't have too much trouble. It's well within the expectation for Aaron Nola to have a very nice start here.
Okay, so interest in Nola. The only real downside to these pitchers is that they are the two highest owned pitchers on the slate. Nola coming in on DraftKings at 34.4% ownership, Robbie Ray at 29.3%. But that is because, as you mentioned, they're high upside pitchers who are coming in just cheaper than the other high upside pitches on the slate for the most part, with Nola coming in 8,900 on DraftKings, Robbie Ray at 8,300. With a lot of the field going to Nola, do you see yourself getting to any Seattle stacks as leverage?
Limited shares, just because I expect to have a pretty big share of Nola myself. So I think I'll have some insurance there. And I do think it's a good lineup. Like I said, I like these kids. I've been going to them a decent amount this year. Against right-handed pitching, 20.5% strikeout rate is 7th best in baseball. They're creating runs 10% better than average, which is 9th best. Middling power so far, but there are some bats that I like in there. So you can definitely, depending on the version of the lineup that they roll out, Adam Frazier, Ty France, JP Crawford, Eugenio Suarez, Jesse Winker, Abraham Torrio, Julio Rodriguez, and Jared Kelnick, all pretty interesting. So just look for what version of the lineup rolls out. If Julio Rodriguez is hitting up toward the top of the lineup again, he hit third yesterday, that would be super interesting to me. I don't expect it against a righty, but we'll see what happens.
Okay. What about the other side of the game? Do you have any interest in Robbie Ray going up against the Phillies, or Phillies bats up against Robbie Ray?
This is my undercut. This is the guy I'm going to be getting away from. If the field wants Robbie Ray at 30% for 8,300 on DK, they can have him. If they want him at 18.5% on FanDuel, they can have him for 8,800. I'll have shares. I'll definitely not leave Robbie Ray completely on the table, but I think we're getting regressed Robbie Ray. 20.3% strikeout rate so far, 8.5% walks, 4.14 xFIP, a 1.24 whip. Swinging strikes dropped from last year's excellent 15.5% to its still good 12%, but he's just not found it. He doesn't have what he had last year right now. Last year struck out 32.1% of hitters. That was a career high. He's a good strikeout pitcher, but he's always been egregiously bad for walks. He went from a double digits walk rate over the 3 previous years to a 6.9% last year. He cut his walks more than basically in half, and he was stellar. That's kind of what everybody always said that he had to do. This year, it's bounced back up. It's at 8.5%. Before the last start, it was even higher. So if he wrangles it in, he'll be back to a decent pitcher. He needs to find the strikeouts again. But against an elite Phillies lineup with a ton of power, give me that side of it, because he's a guy who's always given up hard hit. 39.8% this year. Last year, 42.9% with a 9.8% barrel rate in what was an excellent season. When he's struggling, I will take the bat side of that every time. I will have some shares, like I said, just in case he does have that big start. There are some strikeouts in that Phillies lineup, but I'm much more enthusiastic about the Phillies side of this one.
Okay. On FanDuel, Phillies coming in at 1.7% ownership on the stack with a 2.9% chance of being top stack on the board. So you have interest there. How much interest? Are you going to be going well over that 1.7% in terms of full stacks? Are you going to be doing a lot of one-offs? What is your interest level in the Phillies here?
I expect I'll have a pretty big share of them in terms of, I mean, it's a big slate, so I'm going to try and spread out as much as I can, but they'll be one of my higher on stacks, particularly considering all the weight of ownership on Ray and the fact that I'm going to deliberately undercut Ray. And again, I want to reiterate, I do think there is upside to Ray here. I do not advocate for taking him entirely out of your player pool. And if you totally disagree with me and you've been planning on playing Robbie Ray all day, over the field, at the field, whatever, don't necessarily just take that I'm specifically targeting that spot as a reason to totally take him off your board or make dramatic changes. Believe in what you believe in. And the numbers from last year totally justify the play. There's plenty of upside to it. He rates out well in Alex's tools. For me, it's just a positioning thing almost as well, with just wanting to get over the field on a Giolito. I need to draw those shares from somewhere. So those are going to come out of Robbie Ray, and I'm just going to give him the Luke Giolito and get him from 6% into the 20s maybe, or instead of going 20% Robbie Ray. So it's just a play like that. And I forget what the original question was.
I was just asking about your interest level in the Phillies and which Phillies bats you think you're going to get to, whether it's going to be full stacks going up against Ray, or you're just going to be playing some one-offs.
Right. Yeah. And in answering that, I derailed myself into explaining my Ray take again. So yes, I definitely want to be getting to full stacks of the Phillies. I definitely want to be using guys like Bryce Harper, Rhys Hoskins, Kyle Schwarber as one-offs here, getting nice big home run marks on all three of those guys. Nicky Castellanos as well. Alec Bohm from the top of the lineup. This lineup plays pretty well, depending on which version of it comes out, plays pretty well, at least like 1 through 7 most nights.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the first crunch that I ran, which I refreshed, and it's only showing me 411 lineups. But I'm getting to 30% Ray and very limited Phillies, and I think that I'm going to have to make an adjustment to make sure that I get some Phillies into my lineups just by limiting other stacks and kind of forcing them in there. Because I'm with you. I think that Robbie Ray, it's a high volatility spot, which is the kind of spot that I like to target, you like to target. So I think that makes all the sense in the world to have some Robbie Ray lineups, but also to maybe hope that Robbie Ray is not the same pitcher that he was last year.
Yeah, and with that optimizer wrinkle and the fact that he's 83 on DK, 88 on FanDuel, he's going to come up like that like crazy for people, and the Phillies bats are not. So it's an anti-optimizer play as well. You're going up against the field who people aren't making manual adjustments out there a lot of the time. They're taking what they get out of Fantasy Cruncher. He's going to get a lot of ownership. We're probably a little light on the Robbie Ray side, and I don't think people are going to the Philly stacks here. So I like it.
Just one more reason to play the Phillies stacks. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to force them in a little bit. All right. Anything else you want to say about this game before I tell people about our best bets package?
Cue the Robbie Ray complete game shutout, 14 strikeout game.
You just gave the caveat. You don't mean to get away from Robbie Ray. It's just a high volatility spot. So maybe he will. All right. Let me tell you about our best bets package. Now is the time to check out our best bets package. Click the link below to subscribe, as our team of experts use Awesemo's industry-leading projection models to identify the best bets available in the NBA, MLB, and more each day. We are confident these bets will be worth more than the price of admission. So click that link below and start betting today. If you want a free preview of our best bets, follow our @Awesemo Best Bets Twitter handle and turn on notifications, as we will be posting one free premium bet every day. I imagine this is also where we're going to be getting Gret's dong picks now. I saw that Greg is getting into the dong picks business. I think that's going to be in the best bets package. I guess I should make sure that that's the case. But I know that Greg is going to start giving out dong picks every day, and I do not mean
based on
what you think.
Based on the ROIs and the win rates on OddsShopper, I believe in our prop tool. I think that's what Greg's going to be targeting. Yeah,
we're talking baseball here. Dong picks in terms of baseball. All right, let's move on to the next game. We've got the Miami Marlins at the Arizona Diamondbacks. Jesus Luzardo on the mound for the Marlins. Madison Bumgarner on the mound for the Diamondbacks. Marlins with a 4.4 run implied total. Diamondbacks at 3.8. Let's start with Luzardo. Any interest there? Luzardo going up against the Diamondbacks, or Diamondbacks bats on the other side?
Yeah, I definitely want to have some Luzardo. Young pitcher, former premium prospect, really finding it at the major league level. 33 and a third percent strikeout rate so far this season. Has walked too many guys at 11.4%, but it hasn't really bit him. 1.06 whip, 13.2% swinging strike rate, a 34.1% CSW percentage. He's been looking really, really good. The contact marks when guys do make contact are a little bit high, but going up against the Diamondbacks lineup that I know people have won some money in some spots with them. They've been a little bit frisky, but so far this year against lefties, 71 WRC plus, 29% worse than average creating runs, 29th in baseball, and a 111 ISO, 23rd in baseball. I can definitely attack that with a premium pitcher that I really believe in here. The Diamondbacks have been good limiting strikeouts to just 20.9%. That's 10th best in the split against lefties here. But I think Luzardo is just supremely talented, and the prices are probably about right for his talent. I wish he was cheaper on this slate because there are just so many other interesting premium pitchers. So I think they probably did him a disservice by pricing him here, but that does help us get to shares of him. It's kind of like Kyle Wright, where he's just going to be low owned because people aren't used to paying 10K for Luzardo on FanDuel. 9,100 on DK, still under 10%. I think you can target that as well.
Yeah, coming in at 7% owned just because of the price tag, as you mentioned, it's about right, but that's why people aren't getting there. We've got an 11.3% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on DraftKings, so I would like to come in over the field on Luzardo as well. With Luzardo being a talented pitcher, is he somebody you're going to be targeting at all with Diamondbacks bats?
Probably not. I haven't really gone to this team a ton. I've gotten some one-offs around like a Luplow on the right nights, and I've gotten them right a few times. No Dalton Varsho in the lineup today. Cooper Hummel, Jordan Luplow, Ketel Marte, Christian Walker. These are uninspiring names. You can grab some Christian Walker for a home run upside one-off, maybe some Jordan Luplow, same story, lefty-righty. I don't think that it's a tragic mistake to get there, but with people going there in the 7 to 10% range on both sites, I don't really think I want to. So I'll have a few shares around the edges, I'm sure, and a few one-offs, but not a target for me.
Okay, I'm seeing right now on FanDuel, it's showing me that they're just coming in at 3.8% ownership on the Arizona stack. So fairly neutral play on FanDuel, but yeah, if they're going up against a solid pitcher, they're not really going under-owned today relative to their odds of success. So I don't have a ton of interest there either.
Yeah, and they look negatively leveraged on DK from near the bottom third team, negatively leveraged, not even a great value score.
Right.
I don't need to get there. Let's go to Baltimore and that monster value score now. You see Baltimore in the middle of the board now? 21% value rating with positive leverage now in the middle of the board, not going up against Waino anymore.
I apparently need to refresh because I had not seen that yet. But yeah, I knew that I was going to have some Baltimore interest here, but I did not realize that they were going to jump that much. So that's it's good to see.
I just refreshed. Also, it's now 23.8% value rating, still at positive leverage, 3.5%, only 6.4% owned for the O's going up against Packy Norton.
Yeah, that's a solid spot for the Orioles. So more interest there than the Diamondbacks. What about the other side of this game? Do you have interest in Madison Bumgarner on the mound for the Diamondbacks? He's probably going to get thrown out again, right? He's got a temper. It feels like he's always had a pretty big temper. It's always a cause for concern. He only has a 15.3% strikeout rate this year. Do you have any interest in Bumgarner, or will he be targeting Marlins bats against him?
I probably won't go there. I'm picking my spots with Mad Bum and where to evangelize about the fact that he's still only 32 years old, former guy, yada, yada, yada. I do still believe there's more than a 15.3% strikeout rate there, but we're getting a little thin on time for him to prove me right about that. I don't love this spot for him. The Marlins are justifiably very high owned, so I don't know how much of them I'm going to get on the other side of this one. Not the greatest lineup in the world, but some good right-handed hitting, and they stacked it up, or at least the projected lineup is just stacked with right-handed hitting. So you can get to guys like Jazz Chisholm, Jesus Aguilar, Jorge Soler, Avi Garcia in the middle of that lineup. And then there's a couple pieces around the edges, like Garrett Cooper is fine. Brian De La Cruz can be fine. Miguel Rojas can be fine. So there's some pieces there, but they're all owned in the mid-teens on both sites. I just don't think I'm going to get to that much. I'll be below the field on them for sure, but that's probably not going to lead me to Mad Bum shares here. It's probably not the greatest opportunity to roster Mad Bum, despite good pricing. If you wanted to roll a few sets of dice at 6,400 on DK, it's not the worst thing in the world. If you were thinking I need that super value play, kind of like what we were talking about before, he's definitely a better opportunity than Pat Corbin, I think.
Yeah, it's shocking to me that Madison Bumgarner is only 32 years old, because I think of him as he's been in the league for so long. It feels like his peak was, a number of years ago. So it feels like he's 38, but only 32 years old. So maybe still a talented pitcher, but not the best spot. Anything else you want to say about this game before we move on?
No, I'll use that time to talk more about Mad Bum. The thing that kills me about him is most of his injuries were weird stuff. He got in a motorcycle accident. He wasn't, it's just all weird shit like that piled up. He didn't have a lot of structural stuff. He never had Tommy John. So it wasn't anything like that hampered him. It's just, kind of lost it, kind of had weird injuries pile up. So we'll see where it goes. But only 32.
Yeah.
Part of our lives a long time.
keeping it on Mad Bum, D-Zong says to me, it was not Bumgarner's fault he got thrown out. The umpire checking his hand in that game was taunting him. And that is true. I agree with you that the umpire was definitely acting a little strange there. So it was more on the umpire than Mad Bum. But
the
also
apologized to him, if I'm not mistaken. After,
did he really? I didn't see that
on Twitter. Yeah, I think, or maybe, apologized in general, something about I always want to umpire as if my kids were sitting in the front row or something along those lines. So yeah.
That's funny.
That was a weird one. Did you see how he was like staring at him while he was like rubbing his hand too?
And then, they did play it in slow motion too, which made it look even worse. But it was
MLB
strange.
Network really handed up on that.
Yeah, it was a strange situation. But Bumgarner does have a bit of a temper. It's not the first time that his temper has flared up either. All right, let's move on to the Chicago Cubs at the San Diego Padres. We've got Wade Miley on the mound making his season debut for the Cubs, going up against Mike Clevinger for the Padres. Let's start with Miley. Do you have any interest there, or are you going to be targeting him with Padres bats?
Probably won't get there on FanDuel. He's 7,000. I do love to dabble in those value guys. I played the hell out of Elisa Hernandez, and I had a lineup several lineups in the top 50 that had such limited pitching performances last night, but just had so much hitting built into them by virtue of just being willing to play some $7,000, $6,000 pitchers on FanDuel. I just don't think that this is a great spot the first outing of the season for Miley here. At 4,000 on DK, though, I think maybe you can justify it if he's going to see the pitches. It's just such a cheap price, and they were talking about it on the show this morning. He's a guy he's a pitch to contact type pitcher, but he's fairly effective at it. He's not going to give you a big strikeout performance on any slate, but at 4,000, he might give you a few clean innings against what I think is not a great Padres lineup here. So with tempered expectations at 4,000 on DK, maybe you roll a couple of dice, but it's not a spot to get carried away with, I don't think either.
Yeah, it's not a spot where you're expecting Wade Miley. He himself does not have huge upside, but because he is only 4,000 and he is the only real viable 4,000 pitcher on this slate, the upside is in the lineups that he allows you to get to. So I have some interest in Wade Miley just because he's the only 4,000 pitcher that allows you to really spend up in every other spot with an SP1 and then solid stacks around him. So coming in at 0.5% ownership with a 27.8% chance to be one of the top 2 value pitchers on the board. Those are the reasons to get to Miley. It's not because you're expecting him to get 20 plus fantasy points. It's because even if he gets 14 fantasy points on DraftKings, that might allow you to get to stacks and an SP1 that has higher upside than other stacks.
Exactly. I mean, when you're paying, let's just using Manny on the other side of this game at 5,700, when you're paying 1,700 less for a pitcher than you are for a hitter, I mean, that's advantageous. You can spend that money pretty effectively in DK lineup. So yeah, I think that is a play at least, worth making from time to time.
Yep, exactly. What about the other side of this game? Are you going to be playing any Mike Clevinger going up against the Cubs, or are you going to be targeting Clevinger with some Cubs bats?
Yeah, I'm going to be playing some Clevinger here. I think he's very underpriced for his general talent. Just came back off the injured list after an extended absence, went 4 2/3, but threw 90 some odd pitches. They were just like, yeah, man, go ahead, knock yourself out. You see these teams manage some of these guys with kid gloves, and the Pod's not necessarily like that. So I expect him to be full bore against a pretty bad Cubbies lineup here. I think there's plenty of strikeouts on the table for him, assuming we're getting 90 some odd pitches. Clevinger's a broad range of outcomes type. He's a little bit volatile in terms of he could go out and have a great strikeout game. He also might walk a few too many guys, might get dinged up, but against a team with a 24.8% strikeout rate, I'm willing to go there when he only costs 7,600. That's a much better investment on FanDuel at 7,600 than like Wade Miley would be for 7,000. I think that buys you a few bats on FanDuel, and he's under 10% owned over there. Definitely like the spot. 6,900, same thing on DK. He's probably under owned for less than 30% ownership at 6,900 on DK, to be honest.
Okay, so that's interesting here. So your perspective is that he's under owned because he is 6,900, only coming in under 30% ownership. The top stacks tool would tell you that he's over owned with a 9.8% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the slate and a 14.3% chance of being the top 2 value on the slate. So this is a spot where you're disagreeing with the simulations. You think that maybe there's a little bit more upside than what was put in for Mike Clevinger in the Sims.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to say. I disagree with it necessarily because I think like our probability of being a top 2 pitcher is around 10%. I think that's probably right. So the way that we're doing leverage there, yeah, I do agree with what the top stack tool is saying there. I think maybe where we've got him calibrated a little low would actually be in that value column at 6,900. I think the purchasing power of what you save between him and going to somebody higher up on the board, let's say even a Severino for 1,000 more. I think you've got a better upside spot with Clevenger in terms of the probability of success is around the same. He's got a worse lineup that he's facing, costs you less, buys you bats, and is, similarly popular. It's not like there's a major difference between 14.3 or between 27.4% popularity and 19.7%. That's not crazy different. So I just think there's value in that price offset. And then the other pitchers are above them are all more expensive. So I really like the price, the purchasing power that it gets. And sometimes I don't think that's necessarily reflected through the tools.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
No, I think that was a good way to say it. I just want to respond. Arcothello says, did you say Miley is 0.5% owned, but could be 24% optimal in the tools? So what I said is 0.5% owned with a 27.8% chance of being one of the top two values. So that's just points per dollar. He has a 27.8% chance of being one of the top pitchers on the board in terms of points per dollar. So not quite the same thing as being optimal, but maybe allows you to get to some spots. Definitely not 28% optimal though, just 27.8% chance of being one of the top two in terms of points per dollar. All right. Anything else you want to say about Cubs versus Padres before we move on to the last game of the slate?
No, let's jump out of this one. I don't think we talked about the bats, but I'm not all that interested in any of the bats. Maybe some one-offs from the Cubbies side of things to take against my Clevenger weight. And I'm thinking of, like, say, a Suzuki, Ian Happ, maybe some Wilson Contreras when I say that. On the other side, if you want to roster Padres against Wade Miley, I'd be primarily interested in Manny Machado, the right-handed power bat there. Everybody else in that lineup kind of overperformed to this point in the season. I don't love this lineup. I've talked about it a lot. So probably limited shares of both offenses.
Okay, sounds good. Let's move on to the Rockies at the San Francisco Giants. We've got Antonio Senzatella on the mound for the Rockies going up against Alex Wood for the Giants. The Rockies have a 3.2 run implied total, Giants 4.5. Let's start with Senzatella. Do you have any interest at all in Senzatella going up against the Giants?
I do not.
All right. How about the Giants bats going up against Senzatella?
Yeah, I definitely think that's a spot that we can get into. Everybody under 5,000 on the DK slate interests me. Everybody under 3,500 on the FanDuel slate interests me. I don't think they're owned high enough. I think that was reflected in our leverage in the top stacks when I wrote about it earlier in the day. They were one of my secondary featured stacks. Really like the idea of getting to some of this lefty power. Mike Yastrzemski, Brandon Belt, Jock Peterson, Brandon Crawford, all premium lefty bats with Wilmer Flores stuck in the middle of them at the top end of the projected lineup here. The average WRC plus for Yastrzemski, Belt, Wilmer, and Jock Peterson is a 135. That the quartet is on the average 35% better than average creating runs, with Brandon Belt leading the way at 51% better than average in his 83 plate appearances. Definitely think there's interest in that. Tidro Estrada, Lamont Wade, even Luis Gonzalez, and Joey Bart from the back end, 1 through 9, depending on how this lineup actually comes out, because they do mix and match a lot for platoon reasons. I think you can throw bats at Senzatella all day.
Yeah, and they're coming in a little bit under owned currently on FanDuel in terms of top stack, coming in at only 5.2% owned on the stack with a 5.9% chance of being the top stack on FanDuel. So looking good there as well. What about the other side of this game? We've got Alex Wood on the mound going up against the Rockies. Wood with a 25% K rate so far this year. Do you trust that you're going to be playing Alex Wood at all today? And what about Rockies bats on the other side for a little bit of leverage?
Yeah, I tell you what, I think I prefer the Rockies bats side of the equation, which is a weird thing to say. It's the Rockies on the road, but they've been frisky this year. I think Alex Wood is a good pitcher. I wouldn't be surprised to see him come out, have a very effective start, maybe not an overly DFS relevant start, and just kind of shut this team down, win, a 4-3 ball game, something like that. I think that's more what we can expect from him here. Wood so far this season, the lefty, 25% strikeout rate. Last year, over 138 and 2/3. He was a 26% strikeout rate. Very good xFIP in general. But going up against the Rockies lineup so far this year, 19.7% strikeout rate against lefties, 7th in baseball, 127 WRC plus, 5th in baseball, 27% better than average creating runs against lefties so far this year. Not a ton of power. Oddly, for a team with so many right-handed power hitters in it, including CJ Cron, they haven't really shown the lefty-righty power so far, which is weird, but I think it's certainly there. So yeah, give me some shares of Connor Joe, CJ Cron, Randall Grichuk, even some Brendan Rodgers, even the lefties, Charlie Blackmon, Ryan McMahon. I can roster them lefty here. I don't love the spot. I won't get totally carried away with it, but I do think they're interesting at under a 1% ownership for anybody on the team.
Yeah, 0.6% ownership on the full stack, 2% chance of being the top stack on the board. So positive leverage in the top stacks tool. I like your reasoning. Looks good to me. This is the last game of the slate. Anything else you want to say about this game or about the slate in general before we
just on Wood real quick? On DK at 8,100, where would you come in? 19.6% owned on Wood. I'm just kind of curious because I do think that's an interesting spot game theory wise for the slate. There's a handful of pitchers we discussed in that general range.
Yeah, so he's coming in as a negative leverage play on DraftKings, and that's what my sims not my sims, what the optimizers currently give me as well. I'm coming in right around his optimal rate. He's got an 11.5% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the board at 19.6% ownership. Currently, I am getting to 11.9% of Alex Wood, and I'm totally fine with that. There are a couple other pitchers that I'm going to push up, so I might end up getting a little bit less, but probably not a whole lot. I think I'd like to be right around that optimal rate for him, I think.
Yeah. I think that 8 to 11 range makes a lot more sense than that like 18 to 20 that we're projecting him for. So I agree with the undercut there.
All right, sounds good. Thanks again, Terry, for all of your knowledge here on the slate. Very helpful. Guys, before you head out, give us a like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of our shows, DFS offers, giveaways, and much more. Once you subscribe, hit that notification button to get alerts when our shows go live. Be sure to also check out today's premium tools, free premium tools, and data, which are NBA player projections, MLB player projections, PGA player rankings, and NHL top stacks. We got the NBA deeper dive and live before lock coming up next. So stick around if you're playing NBA tonight. Thanks for watching and have a great night.